Hey folks, welcome back. Maybe we should do something inside the grid of Bitwig Studio. So if you're already 100 ppm project running, nothing else, and maybe let's create your poly grid. Okay, we have an oscillator here and we have an envelope here and an audio out. So this works with my MIDI keyboard when I actually here arm this track, which is already armed. Nice. So I can play music with it. Also, the grid itself is in monophonic mode, so it's only one voice active. So you can create a self-running patch. So this is very important. If you have here maybe multiple voices, 6 or 12, pull it down to mono, so we have a self-running patch. So what we want to do now, or today, is to actually create some kind of algorithmic or predictable melody synth, kind of. So kind of a self-running patch with predictable melodies. And I want to leave this here as a core, basically, that you can see it. It's basically just a normal synthesizer playing an oscillator through an amplitude modulator and then to output. And we create here pitch signals and gate signals inside the grid, and maybe also audio effects to tweak a bit the tonality. So what we want to do first is to create pitch signals for this input here, right? We don't want to use a MIDI keyboard or the note clip input to change the pitch. We want to create something inside the grid. And there are multiple ways to do this. You can, for instance, take the pitches module here, drive this in, and then change the pitch this way. And you can see there is no sound coming out because we need to still trigger here something on our MIDI keyboard. So we can replace this here instead with a gate thing, which is also self-running, and it puts out some triggers, as you can see at certain points, right? So we can connect this, and every time here display bar goes over these yellow dots, it triggers the envelope and we get the sound. But now the problem is, as you can hear, the pitch changes when the gate is active, right? So pitch is changing while a note is playing. So we need to persist the pitch for this note. We can do this with a sample and hold. And it takes a gate input here. And we can take the gate input from this module. So now, every time a gate is playing, we sample the current pitch from this pitches module and hold it as long as the gate is active or high or 1. So now you have a persistent pitch for each note you play or you trigger. That's exactly what we want. So now that we have this, we can modify this in all kinds of directions. For instance, we can use an attenuate to scale the whole thing down. Or we can modify the playback speed here of this. For instance, take a phase signal. So instead of using the phase precord, we use the external phase input, which is the same as before. But now we can tweak it here with some different modifiers, for instance, a mirror. So now it plays back and forth. So we can change the speed or the direction of the playhead here of this pitches module. And we can also speed this up or slow this down. So yeah, all kinds of possible ways to do this. But this time I want to use a random mod. And this is called Sample and Hold Lfo, because it's an LFO and the values are sampled from noise. And this outputs here random values over time, so you can see. And it's not predictable. It's every time it generates a new value, it's completely random. And it also outputs pretty high notes. So when you use this here as a pitch input, you get something like this. right? Pretty high-pitched notes, not really pleasant. Because everything on top here, the value on top is basically C6, C7, something around those lines, so very high-pitched. So we need to scale this down. You can do this pretty easily with an attenuator. So 100% is the same outcome as before, but now we squeeze this down to maybe 20% or something like this. It's the same signal as before, it's just pushed together, squeezed together, and we still have the random values, and the resolution is not that high anymore, but you can see we barely surpass here the first line. So it stays around C3, so 0 is C3, and this is probably just within 1 octave here of pitch noises. So we can use the signal pretty easily now in here and stay within 1 octave of pitches. Okay, so this is nice. But now we have the problem that we are not within one scale, or it's actually not a scale, it's just random pitches chromatically. And maybe we take here a quantizer, and I put this here after the sample and hold so we can see it better switching around. So now every time we trigger here something, we sample and hold a random value from the sample and hold, and then push it through this pitch quantizer, which then changes it so it hits exactly one note. And which note you can select, or which notes you want to have, you can select here with this interface. And I dialed in here my beloved D sharp minor scale, and now it sounds much better probably. You get a nice melody. But now still the problem is that the sample and hold outputs random values all the time. So it's not a repeating sequence or anything like that. It's just random notes one after the other. And we want to have some predictability in there. We want to also have some repeating patterns. And yeah, we do this. First I take here the oscilloscope in there. We put this here into hold mode, and I also made a tutorial about the sample and hold behavior I made a video about this. I linked to it in the description probably. So when you have this on sample and hold or on hold, you actually need to drive the phase input of this LFO to get numbers out. So you can use here a value, drive this, and when you change the value, get random numbers, but only two numbers. Because the phase input range of the sample and hold is actually not between 0 and 1, it goes much further. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. And you basically can use this, or can see it as an kind of modifier where you can grab notes from an Excel table. And you can increase the numbers of tables you have access to by going up in value. So this value knob only ranges from 0 to 1. So we can only access 2 values basically. So this is the first value, this is the second value. So now we need to increase here this value by maybe using a multiply and a constant. And we want to access up to 10 values, right? So now when we move this here, we can see we have much more different values. But the kicker now is that every time you reach the same position with this value knob, you get the same random output. So it's basically a fixed noise sample that you can access with this constant and this value, which is pretty nice actually. So now that we have this, we need, of course, different notes all the time. So we have to modulate this, right? So it moves all the time. We get different values, which is then transformed into pitches, which gets us a melody. So instead of modulating this, I'm just taking a phase input, which moves all the time, its ramp signal. It's also exactly 1 bar long, and you can change how long this is by selecting the grid and go here to the left side of device face, and you can change the length to 2 bars maybe. So now you have a ramp signal that goes over 2 bars. And also all the playback speeds here of these, for instance, this gate module now, this is now 2 bars long because it takes the phase input here, right? So when you switch this back to 1 bar, you can see it plays much faster. So everything inside the grid that uses the phase input behaves differently when you change the device phase. So this is very important to know. So we switch this back here to length, and maybe we want to only change the length of this phase signal, right? So we can use a scaler for this. You can say make it twice as long, twice as fast. This is twice as slow. So now you can see the phase signal is, yeah, 2 bars long. But this one still behaves like before because we only changed the scaling of this phase input here, or phase output. So now that we have this, we can use this as an input here to change the outcome of the sample and hold LFO. But we also want to multiply it here, right? Because we want to have nothing between 0 and 1. We want to have something between 0 and 10. So now we multiply this by 10. 0 is still 0, and 1 becomes 10. So we have a ramp signal going from 0 to 10. Easy, right? Okay, so now it plays, you can already see it plays some kind of melody that goes across 2 bars. Maybe pump out your more notes. Something like this, we have more different notes in there. So let's play this actually. Yeah, fine. So we have a melody generator that generates melodies, but the melody is always the same. It's repeatable and it's predictable. And when you probably save this as a patch here and reload the patch, or save this in a project and save the project, every time you reload the project and the patch or the preset, you get a different random outcome here. You get a different melody. That's something that's very important to know, because you can't persist this. That's the sad part of it. And we don't have anything inside the grid yet to persist anything that you created within the grid. I hope we get something like this in the future, but for now, it's not possible. So every time you reload this project or this preset, you get a different random value numbers, a different random noise sample that's getting sampled and holded here, and you get a different melody. Okay. Okay, just leave this at that here. So now we created basically some kind of medium complex pitches generator that outputs predictable notes. And we also have a small little gate generator here. It's pretty simple, it's just a gate module, but for now it's perfectly fine. So what we can do now, the next thing would be maybe to introduce some audio effects, right? So maybe use a delay, a mod delay here, but instead of putting this in between here, we just use a blend. We can blend between the dry signal and the wet signal. So if you pull this down to 1, you only hear the dry signal, and this is only the second input, which is the delayed signal. We also want to have probably, let's put this to play here. Probably want to have here some feedback running. So you can hear it's a melody, it's always the same melody. It changes a bit in the second half, and it's pleasant to listen to. I think when you want to have a different set of values here, you can re-trigger this LFO here by just using a trigger button. connect this, maybe make the pre-chord off so you can't trigger it actually with the keyboard. And every time you press this, you get a different random values. Different random values. So trigger again. So you can see the melody changes, but then it keeps staying the same. Maybe use an octaver here. Pull this down. Okay, what else can we do? We can do something like sequencing this a bit. Instead of going here to the arranger and doing it with the arranger, we can still stay within the modulation system. We can use the steps mod. And we need to start playing this here. It's 4 bars, okay, fine. You can see it's playing here, right? And we maybe clear here everything out. And we go to quarter notes. And now I think this is exactly 4 bars long. And at the end from these 4 bars, we maybe paint in here these bars. And then we modify the constant, which is not possible, but we want to modify here the constant, right? To change the melody a bit at the end of the 4th bar, just to have some variety in there. So what I do usually, instead of using this multiply here with the constant, which is basically just an amplifier, more or less a signal amplifier, we just use a gain knob here, something like this, which does basically the same. It's just, you can see it in the lower left corner, it's just a multiplication, right? It's exactly the same symbol. So you can change the constant here with the knob, and you have an input and an output. So it's the same thing. We can take the signal here, drive it in there, remove this, go to maybe 10, something like this. Of course, it's not the same number as before, so dB is not a number, it's basically a logarithmic scale. But when you amplify here this, you get kind of the same result. So it amplifies the signal, but now we can modulate this here with the steps mod. So maybe at the end from these 4 bars here, I want to have a different kind of a change to the melody. Maybe we also want to have higher notes, so we can change that attenuate. Too much. So you have a repeating pattern in here, and here we change up the melodies a slight bit to get some variation. So this is how I usually sequence stuff. Also we have here a tri-signal. Maybe we use a random mod here. And this random mod also has a free mode. You can also switch to a sync mode if you want to have this always at the same position in your arrangement, in your global arrangement. It switches here to smooth and to bar. And now I want to have fade in of this mod delay every 4 bars. Now you can see here the line is going up over the course of 4 bars. And switching back because we have here a loop running. Maybe make this a bit longer here. If you use multiple of these random things here, then you can sequence stuff in and out over time, and it's never overlapping, it's always different, you know. And these slow modulations basically sequence stuff for you. So maybe bring in a reverb here. Maybe clone this here down and change the mixing of this. So because this is a different random modulator here, and then this is a different seed than this one, and they are never the same. They never overlap basically. So sometimes we have more delay in there, sometimes we have more reverb in there, and it constantly changes, and it's always a different combination of values, which brings in a lot of variety and interesting changes. And if you do this with a lot of things in your patch, it makes it, in my opinion, more interesting. So modulation, we can do the same here with the modulation inside the patch as we did here with the LFO. So maybe take this one here out and maybe also use some labels. Call this here pitch generator. And this one here is our modulator. Modulator generator. Something like this. And yeah, maybe use here a different trigger for this, so we can trigger it separately. And we use this output here as modulation. Maybe the wavetable position. Maybe we introduce here also a filter. Maybe I should use here a different AD for that. Okay, so now we have here a filter, we have a delay as audio effect, and also separate AD. Sounds more like FM. Maybe we should never go down to 0 here. Maybe start at 15%. So now what we also can do is we use a dice module here. And every time we trigger a node, we trigger this dice. And this dice outputs a random value between 0 and 1. We can use a modulator. And we now create a different decay value for each node, which is also interesting, in my opinion. Also, maybe we can use here the output of the phaser, phase input. We maybe can use this as a pitch mod here for the mod delay. It's maybe too much. 1% is maybe good. So now we have a slight pitch modulation in the delay. Makes it also a bit more interesting, I think. Okay. What else? We could maybe change here the octaver by 2 to have sometimes a bass note in there. Maybe we can use here steps mod for this. So every time at the beginning here we switch down to have some kind of bass note in there. Could be something. So you can see I'm trying to make the most out of what I already have, or try to, instead of creating new stuff. Because the more you add, the more you have to figure out which values goes with what, and it makes it much more harder, of course, to decide what to use and what to leave. And this also sounds nice here to have, instead of this plucky sound, more like an fading in note in there. So we can maybe use here a second dice and do this. And also maybe exchange the gates module here for a probabilities module, which does basically the same. But now you can say these are maybe not likely to be played, but sometimes they play. This is too low here. So you can push this in every kind of direction, as you can see. For me, it's of course always a bit this ambient style, because I like it. And because we use here a quantizer, this is perfectly in pitch with the rest of Bitwig, of course. We can introduce here maybe pad sound. Something like this. Maybe we need to pitch up here this one by 3 semitones. right? So it's always nice to have some kind of pad in there, just to have some orientation. It's maybe too much. Random bleeps here and there could be also nice. Maybe you need to introduce here some goofballs, just to get rid of some frequencies. Also, can use VSTs, of course, if you want to. Maybe slow it down. Slow machine. You get some nice ambient going. Maybe piano in there. Pull this down. Yeah, I mean, maybe just record here some bits. Let's call it a day here. It doesn't matter how long this part is actually. It's actually nice that it's not exactly 16 bars. So it kind of creates some polyrhythmic effect sometimes. So I don't care with these kind of genres. I don't care so much for bar length. At least if it's in the length of an bar, so 2 bars, 3 bars. Here it's 18 bars. The correct would be 16 bars, but this is also fine. Maybe create some bass sound here. Probably also need to have a mono low end here. I'm taking a tool device with 0 only the low end. Yeah. And then we probably want to paint in just one note. Of course, we are lazy. And use here some repeater using Euclid mode. And maybe changing this here, rotate this around so the first note is actually not on the bass drum when we introduce some bass drums. So it's a bit offset, right? maybe a peak limiter here. Not in the top. Maybe more density. Every time we play a note, we want to have a different setting here, maybe for this knob. So we use a random mod, switch this to hold, switch this to note, and we get a new random value only when the note triggers. And this probably needs some reverb and delay here. So I put here something in the high box. -4 is nice. But this is the bass. Maybe you can introduce here a bit of kick drums. I don't know, maybe it's too much, or you want to have it without kicks or drums at all. So split this kick drum up here a bit. Bit of distortion. Just a tad. Maybe reverb. And only maybe not in the low box here. And then we use the ADSR to duck down the reverb every time the kick plays. Maybe in front of this. Could be nice. Okay, so we could maybe also create something in the grid for some hi-hats. Let's do it quickly. Fully grid. Don't need that. We need the noise input. We need the filter. We go for SVF for this one here. Bandpass. In there. Out there. Triggers, clock quantize, something like this. Maybe you need distortion here. And of course a low cut. So now that we have this, we do the same like we did before with the dice modules here. and 2 modulators. It's the stereo. It's also nice to have this here in stereo mode. Maybe a steps mod here to change the frequency a bit. And then a phaser. You can see we can change this here a lot by modifying these knobs. So we probably want to do that. Maybe another one. And a bit of delay. Let's use a random here and bring in a bit of this diffusion here. Switch this to fade, change the delay times. Also bipolar, so we can modulate 2, 3 and 4. Maybe a bit faster. We have a nice little, you know, some hi-hat percussion glitchy stuff. We could maybe use here the VST I showed you in the recent video. Right, we just push here the both buttons so it randomizes basically the pattern and all the, yeah, the FX. Could be nice also in this state. Maybe we switch here between switch this to convert. So now we have the glitch here or the dry signal, and we use a step mod to switch between the two. Only at the end from the bar we want to switch to the glitch plugin. Be also nice to have some hi-hats in there. Short pattern. First one is amplified, so we go for this kind of. Velocity sensitivity, and we can use the velocity, change the length of the decay. Oh, and that's pressure. Other way around. Maybe a bit of swing. Just a tad. So it starts to groove. Maybe polysynth for the main lead sound. We'll probably go to unison 16 voices. A lot of delay. There you go here for space. Let's see how this sounds. I don't want to go too far here with this. So yeah, as you can see, this can lead to interesting results in the background. As a background layer, you can also push this to a completely just lead random melody generator. Maybe also for bass lines. I use this also for bass lines sometimes. Just to have some ideas. If you don't like the melody, just press the trigger button here. And maybe change the trigger sequence here. And you can also influence here with this how dense the melody or the melody plugs are. And we could also modulate this here a bit. So yeah, I think that's it. I want to show you basically how you can go from 0 to something. What else you do on the master here? dB meter, and we want to have maybe minus 10 LUFS. And then we go into the elevate with 0 dB here. Yeah, I think that's it. This project is available then on my Patreon page, of course. You can download this and experiment with it, or maybe make a track with it, or just, you know, play around. But yeah, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Leave a like if you liked the video. Subscribe to the channel. If you have questions, then please leave the questions in the comments. I try to answer them all, and maybe also give me feedback on this video, because I think it's a bit all over the place. Yeah, thanks for watching. See you next time.